we all know history, repeats itself. And it's one of those things where everything has a tendency to do the same thing multiple times, especially with films and in terms of reproducing the same film twice within 1 year, or within a matter of weeks apart. And I noticed that this year, it's one of those classic examples. This year we had Immaculate, the Sydney Sweeney nunsploitation film, which is very much an allegory for abortion, but also very much so a, hey, it's a nun who gets pregnant, might be the Antichrist. Oh, we don't know. We kind of do. We don't know. And then, lo and behold, a few weeks later, The First Omen came out. And personally, from my experience of watching the two, I was lucky to see The First Omen before I watched Immaculate, mostly by happenstance, because when I went to see Immaculate, it just wasn't screening that day. It was really annoying. So, nevertheless, I watched The First Omen, and that does the exact same idea as Immaculate, but set, in the 70s, because it contextually is it's a prequel to the First Omen film. So The First Omen is a prequel to The First Omen. Gotta love it. But at the same time, they're very similar in terms of like the setting, the design, about a nun who goes from, an American or European country that mostly speaks English to Italy, to Rome, to work and live at a convent, whatever the hell they call it, and a nunnery. I don't think that's what they call it. And so, antics ensue, a lot of pregnancy-related stuff, and lo and behold, there is an Antichrist. So they have different endings and different stylizations of narrative choices and how they do their horror, but at the same time, the basis is there. So, again, history repeats itself. The same thing is happening twice within the course of a couple of weeks, which is crazy. A lot of the infamous examples for this would be like Ants and A Bug's Life coming out in the same year, which was more or less if I'm not mistaken, the people who made Ants were originally making A Bug's Life, left, Pixar to work at their own studio, and they had the idea also, so they were just like, let's compete, see who wins. I've never seen Ants, so in my mind, The Bug's Life won. But I know there are differences to the films. It's mostly just a factor of it's about bugs and it's animated. Like, to my knowledge, they're ants. I don't know how many other details collide. Is there grasshoppers? Is there not? I don't know. I usually get ants and ant bully confused a lot of the time because I knew more of ant bully growing up than I did of ants. But either way, that one. Then there's like White House Down with Channing Tatum and Jamie Foxx, and then there's the one with Morgan Freeman, which I think is Olympus Has Fallen. I know that one at least had a trilogy after the fact. So, those same kind of films within the same year or a year or so apart, where it's, what if White House attacked by enemy? Question mark. It's generally the same premise. White guy has to save black president, that kind of jazz. Is the Morgan Freeman even... He's not the president in that one. It's actually Aaron Eckhart. He becomes the president in a later film. Nevertheless, they got to work together, save the president from terrorists, I guess. I've never seen them. I saw part of Olympus Has Fallen. I'm like, man, this movie kind of sucks. So I just stopped watching it. But I have them on Blu-ray, so, I got them from a friend. It's all good. My other example for in recent context would be something like Drive Away Dolls. The Ethan Coen... Is that Joel Coen? Or... Oh my god, I have no idea. I feel like that's bad on my part for not knowing which one's which. One's the Shakespeare guy, the other one's the funny one. At least in my mind. It is Ethan Coen, okay. So you got the Ethan Coen directed and co-written. I'd even say co-directed. His wife did a lot of stuff in that movie, including editing it. And contrast that to Love Lies Bleeding, which is Rose Glass's second film, which of course has Kristen Stewart and the ever so fantastic, in this case, Katie O'Brien. These two films are very similar as well. It's got that thing of they're both queer-led, usually in this case lesbian-led dramas. Well, Love Lies Bleeding's the drama. It's like the darker cousin. Like, if you had twins, this would be the more sadistic one, where it's very heavily on the neon-based, gritty, violent, life kind of sucks, but love perseveres. And that's really great. It's a really interesting film. It's one that I didn't love on my first watch. I'm still actually yet to rewatch it, but I really liked it. It's a film that has some amazing performances, some interesting visuals, and an interesting narrative. But at the same time, while I was watching it, I was thinking, this is really, really similar, at least to some degree, to Drive Away Dolls, which I love. Drive Away Dolls. I had seen that obviously a month or two earlier. That was the. They're not too similar, obviously. That's more of the sex comedy road trip movie, and you're probably thinking, okay, Julian, what the fuck do these two movies have to do with each other? Two lesbian drama action films, whatever, dramedies, that happen to take place in the past, in a certified spot in time. In this case, one's the 80s for Love Lies Bleeding, and the other one is the 90s, so they have their time period set quirks. And it's about two people falling in love, and how people want to stop that for nefarious reasons. They do both relate to crime. I mean, Drive Away Dolls involves hiring a car that happens to have a certain something in the boot that criminals want for nefarious reasons. Gotta love it. And yeah, so it's just, for me, the fact that they both came out within a couple of weeks to each other as well, I'm like it's good. That's one of those things where it's kind of, for me, like the opposite of something like Immaculate and The First Omen, where I didn't like Immaculate, but I loved The First Omen. It's like taking one concept and being like, even if I had seen Immaculate first, and I would have been like, it's okay, but I would have just been like, it's fine, whatever. But then seeing The First Omen, I'll be like, now this is how you do that movie better. I luckily saw it the other way around, but at the same time, I still know that I would have had that exact same impression of, this is how you do that concept, but better. And, oh my god, does The First Omen do it better. But the thing is, with like Love Lies Bleeding and Drive Away Dolls, they're still very different. They have their audiences that almost seem to be very divided. Like, a lot of people, I'd say, like Love Lies Bleeding a lot more, because it's much more drama focused, performance focused, and everything. It has some really interesting visuals, from like surrealist elements, as well as just a really nice kind of romantic drama that leads the film with some great performances. And Rose Glass is a really interesting writer director, so she adds a really interesting flair to it. I do prefer her previous film, the Saint Maud one, but at the same time, they're both still pretty good films. With Drive Away Dolls, however, I preferred it more. I guess I was just really in the mood for a comedy at the time, but I love Margaret Qualley, and she's fantastic in the film. Technically, she's not the lead. I should actually quote who is the lead. So you've got Margaret Qualley, Geraldine. Oh, I'm not gonna. Geraldine Viswanathan. Viswanathan? Yeah, that kind of sounds. It's like Jonathan, but with a Viswanathan. That's a hell of a name. She plays Marion. She's basically the lead. I know that it's top-billed Margaret Qualley here. Also, Beanie Feldstein's in it. I like Beanie. She's great. Carmen Domingo's in it. Pedro Pascal. Short but sweet, same as Matt Damon. It has a fun cast, a good cast of just, like, random faces that you don't know, and that kind of makes it more amusing. But, like, I really like Margaret Qualley. Like, she's an actress that I really enjoy watching her in probably everything I think I've seen her in since she debuted in The Leftovers, and she's done a hell of a lot of good films in the past couple of years, really crazy films, and, I mean, most recently, The Substance. Anyway, not completely on topic. That's a film, Drive Away Dolls, that is very different in terms of both tone and the fact that I feel like that was a film that was much more maligned. A lot of people were like, you either love it or hate it. And I loved it. Other people did not. I'm like, alright, fine. I don't care. I wanted a lesbian road trip movie, and I got it. And it's like a sex comedy, and it's a good romance, and it's funny, and it's Just everything that I wanted it to be, and it was, and I loved it. I love the stupid transitions. It's so goofy. It all adds to the comedy of it. And maybe I just wasn't really there in that mindset when I was present for Love Lies Bleeding. We're not here for my goddamn opinions. We all know that this just is a thing that happens. And most of this is just sheer coincidence. Like the fact that Immaculate and The First Omen came out weeks apart and they're basically the same film is really interesting. And I'm not saying basically the same film in terms of like, in terms of like direction and like art design and acting and performances and special effects and horror. No, they're vastly different to that regard. Like this is why I much prefer First Omen, because not just is it a better usage of the concept, but in terms of like the acting, the directing, the special effects, the horror, works on so many more levels for me than Immaculate did. And that's just one of those crazy things where I've also seen the behind the scenes for Immaculate, and the fact that it was meant to be set in a high school, what we got was so vastly different to what it was meant to be initially. And whereas The First Omen, I'm like, yeah, they clearly were like, we have this property, we need to do something, let's do something with it. So they came up with what they came up with, and surprisingly, I think it works very well. You got Ants and Bugs Life, and that's clearly two different studios going head to head with people who used to work for one of those studios, both of whom had the same idea. Maybe one stole it from the other. Who's to say? Probably the people who actually worked on it. I don't remember who stole it from who, but at the same time, they both made the same goddamn movie to some degree. And it's still interesting. Like, the fact that this happens, it's not obviously not the first time. That was back in the 90s. There's so many times where movies are very, very identical. And I say that being a person who's watched a bunch of classic Universal monster movies, and so many of those are carbon copies of each other. It just so happens that these films are uniquely two different studios making two different films that happen to have a lot of similarities, and usually come out within the same year. I think there was Armageddon and no, not The Core. There's a different one. It's like Dante's Peak and Volcano. A lot of 90s ones. I feel like that's when people started noticing it, because it's like, oh, we like this idea, we want to do this, but instead of it being like someone created the idea and then this person ripped it off a couple months to a year later, instead it's just they happen to come out within months of each other, and there's too many familiarities that is kind of crazy. What the fuck is the other one called? Deep Impact, that's the one, from 1998 versus Armageddon from 1998. Man, aren't movies just crazy? So yeah, it's an amusing thing, because of course it gives you by the end of the year you can pin the two against each other. Where again, I would say Immaculate and for Immaculate and The First Omen, they're so similar, it's crazy. But there's also in my mind, such a vast difference in quality, where one is like an almost masterpiece, the other one is like, sure, okay, whatever. But at least with Love Lies Bleeding and Drive Away Dolls, they're still different enough. That's for me one of those fun, oh, isn't this great? We got two lesbian led kind of, well, just crime films. If you're gonna go with an underpinning a theme genre, it would be crime. They're both lesbian-driven crime films. Just one goes in the dark, neon, brooding territory of the 80s, and the other one's like, hey, what if we're like a 90s film, and also fun and comedic, I say fun in the just fun, adventurous, comedic way, unlike Love Lies Bleeding, which still is a fun film, but not fun in the, at least... it's not fun in the optimistic way. It's not. It's still a good film. So, yeah, I know. There's obviously a lot more, and I don't know why the hell it keeps happening. But it happens every once in a while, and it's such an amusing thing to think about. And, every single time I follow someone on Letterboxd who loves Love Lies Bleeding. I don't even know if they've seen Drive Away Dolls. And the amount of times I see them review it and watch it and give it 5 stars, I'm like, look, this movie's made for you, and that's great. And I know that you probably watch Drive Away Dolls and be like, this is a bit too weird, maybe, I don't know, but at the same time, I will at least look at it the other way around, where I'll be like, I love Drive Away Dolls, I think it's hilarious, I think it's a fucking amazing film, and Love Lies Bleeding is a great film, but just doesn't hit that level for me. It might on rewatch, you never know. So yeah, let me know down below, what's your favourite? Armageddon or Deep Impact. See you next time. My God.